external examination, we look at the surgical intervention that may have been done. If a patient has had an abdominal trauma and then subsequently taken to a surgery to operate for a perforation of the intestine, that is the jejunal perforation is most common in these traumatic blunt force trauma abdomen cases. So a patient has been taken up for surgery and you see that there is surgical intervention. Inside you are not going to find any evidence of trauma in the intestine because that part might have been removed by the surgeon. So you have to document those surgical changes, surgical alterations that are present on the external examination. Also, resuscitation injuries may be present. There might be a central contusion in the chest because of this CPR being administered to the patient. And there might be internal examination. On internal examination, you might find that there are rib fractures present. You might consider it an antemortem trauma, but those are resuscitation injuries. There are artifacts that are produced. So, whole soul, head to toe examination of dead body is very much essential in any autopsy case that you may see. Next, we are going to see the role of internal examination, and for internal examination, what we have to do? First thing is we have to make an incision. What is the incision? What are the types of different types of incision that we are going to see in these next subsequent slides? Okay, what we see is there are different kind of incisions that the literature and textbooks talk about. So we are going to discuss. First is eye-shaped incision. Eye-shaped incision. The eye means literal straight eye. It starts from mentum and goes downwards straight. While going downwards, one should always remember that when we are at the level of umbilicus, we should either go to the left side and then pubic symphysis, or we can go to the right side also. We can take the pose that we want. Why it is important is because umbilicus is a very fibrous structure. While resuturing the body, when you are closing the body, it will be difficult to close the body if you take umbilicus into the incision. So remember this, when we talk about eye-shaped incision, you should always, or any incision for that matter, even in surgery you will see, operation theaters, that umbilicus is never taken into the substance of incision. Okay? So eye-shaped incision starts from mentum, goes downwards from either from left side or from right side, goes till pubic symphysis. This is eye-shaped incision. Next incision that we see is Y-shaped incision. Y-shaped incision is important for females where we have breasts. Because of presence of breast, and we do not want the relatives to have a bad picture of the female body. So what we do is incision is taken from below the breasts. I will remove the whole thing and then start again. I'll take a different color. Okay, so what we do is, for opening the body, what we do is incision will start below the breast, it will come and then come to the sternum, G sternum point, go to the opposite side below the breast, and then it is stretched downwards. Similar way, either left or right of the umbilicus, never through the umbilicus. This is Y-shaped incision. This is Y-shaped incision. It can be connected to head incisions that are given. I'll tell you about head incisions also. It can be connected upwards like this. Okay, this is Y-shaped incision. You can see the Y forming, two limbs of Y and the third limb of Y. Two limbs of Y and third limb of Y. So this is a Y-shaped incision. Next is modified Y incision. In this modified Y, what we do is Y is shortened. The incision will come straight, go downwards like this. It has been given differently by different authors. So somebody has described it like, you come straight down from the posterior mastoid tip. From mastoid tip, you come downwards, straight downwards to the middle of the clavicle and then extend it medially. Right. You come downwards from the mastoid tip, medial, straight downwards to the clavicle and then go medially. In the midline, you connect it both sides and stretch it downwards similarly. Modified Y. It is important. This incision is very good for neck exploration. When we have to find, we are suspecting there is a case of neck trauma. There could have been a case of throttling or strangulation. Then we go with extensive dissection of neck. Usually also we should do, all cases we should examine neck. Other variation that you may see in different textbooks is Y is designed, made like this. Modified Y is made like this. Stretching downwards. Okay, modified Y. Then there is an incision, T-shaped incision. Only theoretical importance, I have not used it in my experience. T-shaped incision. And last but not the least, there is a inverted Y incision. Inverted Y goes from mentum till umbilicus, then it divides into two. Inverted Y is this incision which will go from mentum downwards and then divide into two. You can see the Y has been inverted. So this is important in cases of, anybody would like to volunteer to answer? What is inverted Y useful in? Inverted Y is useful in infants and neonates. Mostly in neonatal and fetal autopsies, not even in infants, because we are going to look at the remnant structures, vasculature. Fetal vasculature. Is there any malformation present? We are going to look for malformation. Okay. Now we are clear. We have four types of incisions. As we saw, there is I-shaped incision, Y-shaped incision, modified Y-shaped incision, then inverted Y-shaped incision mostly, and theoretically one more incision that we saw was T-shaped incision. One more incision is there, but that is only for postgraduate. That is a Z-shaped incision given on the back of the person. To examine, there is back of the person. Another time, there are many modifications as per different authors. So you are supposed to know I, Y, modified Y, and inverted Y. Four incisions that you are supposed to know are I, Y, modified Y, and inverted Y. Next. This is an example of I-shaped incision. As you can see, from mentum to pubic symphysis, we have gone a little to the right of the body. Okay. Then we extend the incision on both sides. Dissecting into the muscle plane, fat plane, all has been taken into one section. And following which we are going to do what? Cut from sternoclavicular joint, go downwards, cut the costochondral junctions, extend it laterally, on both sides and take the central chest plate out. Chest plate will be lifted, taken out, and then we can go with the evisceration, taking the organs out. Taking the organs out. Okay. I-shaped incision has a disadvantage in that the neck is also opened in the beginning. Although we can reserve it till this point and extend it downwards, but still it will not have that much exposure. If these tissues are tied over here, then the exposure down will be lesser. So I-shaped incision, I have always been a fan of modified Y incision. I, in my practice, have always gone with this kind of dissection. Okay. Next. Next we are seeing is Y-shaped incision. In a female where the breasts are present, there we have gone below the breast, extending it downwards. Here also you can observe the umbilicus. Okay. Next. Modified Y. This is one modified Y that we have always preferred. Look at the umbilicus again. Inverted Y-shaped incision. Inverted Y. Above the umbilicus, we divide this into two limbs, both going to the ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. It is useful in neonates and fetus autopsies. Okay. Then to examine vascular malformation. Vascular malformation. Also, other malformations that there might be urachus intact, it will be attached over here. If we cut it, then we'll not be able to see the structures in such a way. So this is more of a practical thing, but you should remember it is important for neonatal examination. Next. In internal examination, we have already covered what are the incisions, different incisions. Then we will see what is the cavity. Okay, for one thing to be emphasized over here, when we examine a head of the person, when we are examining the head of a person, what we are going to do is we will go for a bimastoid incision. In a coronal plane, we will go with a bimastoid incision. And then we will raise an anterior flap and a posterior flap. Anterior flap and posterior flap. If let's assume we are looking at a person this is the mastoid tip, we'll go like this, and on the other side we'll extend it, then we'll raise an anterior flap and a posterior flap. Okay, after the bone has been exposed from both sides, we'll cut the ear attachments from inside. Also, ear attachments have to be cut from inside and extend it forward. It's the anterior way and the posterior way. So bone will be exposed, cranium will be exposed. Once the cranium is exposed, then we will saw the skull like this. Sawing the skull will raise, we will take away the skull part. So, main, what do we call that? I'm forgetting that anatomical term for it. So anyway, we'll take the skull cap out and Then we will examine the brain and meninges and internal structures. Okay. So remember this, it is a bimastoid incision for examination of head. Next, which cavity first? Normally what we do is we will drain the heads in the beginning. First of all, usually. But there is no sequential order to it. Cases will have different presentations. You might want to look for it all depends upon case-to-case scenario. If there is a pneumothorax case, obviously you would like to go with the chest first. If there is a neck trauma case, then you will reserve the neck for the last because you want the blood to be drained. If there is an abdominal case, so the findings of a case will make you decide which cavity should be opened. So there is no particular order to be followed, like there is no hard and fast rule, no particular order to be followed in case of cavities. Remember this, they can ask you in MCQs also, which of the following cavities is opened first, which of the following cavities is opened last. If the last they are saying, then obviously look for strangulation or neck trauma in the question. If it is there, then neck will be opened in the last. But in what order, other cavities, there is no particular order. Organ removal. Now for organ removal, when we have made the incision, we have dissected the muscle planes and we have exposed the cavities, then how to take the organs out? That will become a separate question. If you take all the organs from oral cavity to the rectum, all of the tissues in one mass, remember that, in one mass, then it is known as en-masse technique. En-masse technique, or all the organs in one block if taken out. It is known as en-masse technique. It was given by Latulize. So remember, we have a mnemonic. L is for large and Latulize is for large. So whole mass, en-masse technique, Latulize. Next, we can divide these all into different blocks. We have a cervical block, we have a thoracic block, then we have an abdominal block, and finally we have a pelvic block, that is for urogenital system. Okay, cervical block, thoracic block, abdominal block, and then we have urogenital system. So if it is taken in blocks, then Hohn's technique. If it is taken in blocks, then it is Hohn's technique. Hohn, you can remember it by, there is a Hohn focus in the lung. Hohn focus is considered when it is associated with a lymph node. So two things. So similarly, heart, lung and heart both are taken out together, then it is Hohn's technique. Hohn's technique. Third technique, each organ is taken out differently. One organ, one lung is taken out separately, another lung is taken out separately, heart is taken out separately, then stomach is taken out separately, duodenum, intestine is taken out separately, liver is separate, spleen is separate. All these things if you take out separately one by one, then V is for 1. V is for 1. 1 by 1. All organs are taken out as one organ. Then it is known as Virchow's technique. In French, it is known as Furcault. It's actually a French word, so they will call it Furcault technique. And last but not the least, we have Rokitansky technique. In this technique is useful in very infected HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, there you can see a lot of infections between names, hepatitis HIV, hepatitis B, where taking our organs is risky for autopsy surgeon and also the staff. So to take care of the exposure, so that to minimize the exposure, we have Rokitansky technique. What do we do in Rokitansky technique? Any idea? What can we do in Rokitansky technique? Yes. Nobody is in situ dissection. Yes, Namita has said in situ dissection. In situ dissection, we will not go with taking the organs out, we will dissect the organs in situ and look at the inner surface also, cut surface also. Actually, the whole idea of taking an organ out is to examine it from the outside, all the down, extend all the surfaces, and then we take serial sections across the organ. So, we will examine from different sides what are the pathology or track of wound. Let's say a firearm has entered, a projectile has entered from the chest wall and gone from the back of the chest. So we will look at the whole of the track of the projectile from a medical legal scenario. From a pathological point of view, we will take serial sections. There is a cavity inside the upper apex of lung. So we will look at the different aspect of cavity. What could be the pathological state of this organ? Next, one important thing that we see in autopsy is one important objective. So what we have done today is we have looked at different examination procedures in autopsy. But first thing that we should make clear is what are actually the objectives of this medical legal autopsy that I forgot to bring with. So, but we can discuss it over here. What are the objectives of a medical legal autopsy? We saw that pathological autopsy is usually only for clinical presentation, different clinical presentation, rarity of the situation and academic advancement asks for such an autopsy. But why do we do a medical legal autopsy? Medical legal autopsy is done for many reasons, one of which is identify. There might be something that a person has, person is unknown, and while doing the autopsy you find that certain implant is present in the body. There are so many things that can be present in the person's body which can lead to its identification. Also for identification, police officer is bound to collect the fingerprints of such person, which does not require autopsy, which can be done prior also. But in addition to it, there might be DNA evidence that is required. So for DNA, we will see what all evidences can be preserved for DNA. Then third thing, in a child case, we have to go for a femur. That's like a case scenario. And third is we can have other implants and other things that are present inside the human body which can be seen by internal examination properly. Second objective, this is the first objective, identification. Second objective of autopsy is cause of death. Cause of death, to find the cause of death. Looking at different organ states, we have seen that externally we will see there is any pathological site or injury present. Internally we will see if there is any internal evidence of trauma or any disease state. If nothing is found, then we can go for biochemical and toxicological analysis also. We can use a different this thing also. We can go for microbiological, virological examination, fungal examination, biochemistry examination. We can take chemical examination, everything we can take into consideration while doing a medical legal autopsy. Next we have is time since death. Looking at post-mortem changes, we can say about time since death. These are three, and fourth is evidence preservation. Evidence preservation. It can be external evidence, internal evidence. Externally, something is present on the body. Something is present on the body. It can be an external evidence, like I have witnessed a case in which a female was found wrapped in a suitcase, and that suitcase was transported from interstate transport. It came from Bihar, and on examination of autopsy examination, on external examination, we found a SIM card. A SIM card was present in the clothing, underclothing of the female, and it was police officers were able to locate the person based upon this SIM card. So there might be external evidence, but there might be internal evidence. Whatever evidence, these have to be preserved. Poisoning case is present. You have to go for internal examination to look for, to preserve viscera. This is internal evidence. Viscera examination you have to complete. Next. Okay, we saw that there might be evidences. And in evidence, we'll see what are the different evidences that we have to preserve. Okay. So further examination, we have histopathological examination. A situation is there when the patient there is a allegation of medical negligence. We have to certify the mechanism of death. How did the person die? We have to look at the different organ pictures. Person has died in the custody because of extensive TB. Patient was not taken for treatment. In the custody, patient was in jail. The warden is supposed to answer why the patient was not taken for treatment. If he has died because of tuberculosis and he has not received any treatment, then the warden is legally bound. There might be so many case scenarios where histopathological examination is necessary. So remember this, autopsy pathology is a specialized branch. Autopsy pathology is a specialized branch where we go for histopathological examination, and in this what we do is preserve organ tissues, preserve organs or tissues. Okay, so remember this, the preservative is 10% formalin, 10% freshly prepared buffered formalin, freshly prepared buffered solution of formalin. Remember this, freshly prepared buffered solution of formalin. Next, and this, how much formalin should be there? Some books say 20 times. Some say 10 times. So we always go with a higher figure. 20 times is actually the volume that should be preserved. It should be completely dipped inside so that it will penetrate. How much is the penetration power? 1 mm per hour. Formalin will seep into the organ tissue 1 mm per hour. These are all questions that I am telling you. Next, we have viscera. Evidences for further examination. We spoke viscera examination. Viscera is routine viscera I am talking about over here. Routinely what we preserve in a poisoning case. There might be thousands of poisons, but we have designed a normal way in which viscera has to be preserved. So what is the viscera procedure? We have 4 boxes. Remember that. 1, 2, 3, 4. A, B, C and D. A, stomach with its content, and intestine with its content. At least 30 centimeter of intestine should be taken. At least 30 centimeter of proximal intestine. Always go with proximal intestine. Stomach with its content and proximal intestine 30 centimeter with its content. First box. Second box, liver, 400 gram along with gallbladder. So bile will also be there. Bile should also be there. 400 gram of liver with gallbladder plus spleen, half of spleen. If spleen is there, we'll cut it into half longitudinally. We'll actually, we see the spleen like this, then we'll cut it like this. There will be anterior, posterior half. One half will be preserved. Half of spleen. Third, half of each kidney. Half of each kidney. How? Again, longitudinal section. If we look at it from side, this is kidney, we'll cut it in half. So that upper to lower all poles are present in the section. Why both kidney? One kidney may be non-functioning and poison may be present in the other one. So liver plus spleen plus half of each kidney is in box B. C box number C, blood. They say 30 ml of blood should be preserved. As per FSL, 30 ml of blood should be present. Minimum is 10 ml. Minimum is 10 ml. To run the amount of tests that they are supposed to conduct, minimum is 10 ml, 30 ml is good enough. Next, we have D box. What do we do with the D box? D is for last box. Yes, I want your response in the chat box. D is the last box. Last box containing, we have to have something to be added in these specimens so that poison will come out from the substance and poison will be in the solution. So something that will cause the, not distort the structure of the poison, preservative control. We have to have a preservative. Let's say a corrosive case has come to you and what you do is you add another corrosive into it. Will it act as a preservative? It will not be. If there is a case of alcohol poisoning, if you use rectified, ideally there is, ideally the preservative of choice is rectified spirit. Ideally, but this is a rectified spirit. Ideal preservative is rectified spirit. But it is not that easily available. Easily available not. So what we do is instead we have devised another method where we will use saturated solution of salt. Saturated solution of salt. It is workable. It is locally available, least expensive thing in the market. So workable specimen, workable thing, like, we have, you can see preservative. Salt is a very good preservative. We can use it in our household also for preparing pickles. So similar way we can correlate over here. Viscera can also be preserved in saturated solution of salt, but this does not work for corrosives. Because corrosives, let's say HCl is there and it also contains saturated solution of salt contains chloride ion. So what we are going to do is chloride ion assessment. So anyway, it cannot work in these conditions. So any corrosive, always go with rectified spirit. Next. Next we have is DNA evidence. What we are going to see is what are the samples for DNA. Most commonly, liquid blood can work, but processing should be faster. It should be processed within 24 hours, otherwise it is going to distort. What we'll do is, we'll send the sample, immediately it should go and get processed. Otherwise it will distort or deteriorate. So what we have devised is a separate technique which is known as blood on gauze. Blood on gauze. What we do is dry the blood on a gauze piece. Make a gauze piece, spray some 1 ml to 2 ml blood on it, and that if when dried, it should be always dried. It should not be kept inside an envelope in a wet state. If you keep it, then it will deteriorate. Fungus will grow and it will deteriorate. So dried blood on gauze. Third thing, paper. Flinders Technology Association, FTA paper. This is one commercial paper which is available. It will be available in your sexual examination kit also, safe kit. Sexual assault for kit. FTA paper. This paper will be having 2 circles where you can drop one drop of blood on each, and then you can send it. FTA paper, dried blood on gauze. EDTA containing liquid blood. EDTA containing liquid blood. Okay, this is for blood. If you find a blood stain, then you can just take that stain and put it in a dried container. Send it airtight container and send it. Third thing, we have a muscle specimen. But again, it should be transported in a temperature contained media. The temperature is 0 degrees Celsius. It should be packed in an aluminium foil muscle piece and then send it. 0 degrees Celsius will work for 5 days. If it is stored in -70 at liquid nitrogen, then it can work till 5 weeks. But temperature line has to be maintained, and our police stations are not that equipped. We will preserve these specimen and they will just store it in some place and it will get destroyed. So always take care of local factors, local resources while preserving these cases, while preserving any specimen. Then we have stains, vaginal secretion or seminal stain is present, then just you can, for secretions we can go with liquid is there, then we can swab it. Or if there is a stain present, we can just take that part of the plate or whatever it is and put it inside a dried container. Send it. Third, decomposed bodies. What do we do when we have decomposed bodies for examination and we have to preserve DNA evidence? DNA could have got distorted, but it remains preserved in 2-3 places which are not prone for decomposition. Tooth, bone. Remember that these will remain. This DNA can be isolated from a bone up to 100 or 200 years also. So tooth and bone are the DNA sample of choice for decomposed bodies. Next, we have neonates, fetuses and neonates. Ideal sample, take one femur out, send the femur. Femur, no preservative required, just keep it in a plastic container and send it. Third, some particular important cases, like in an assault case where they are suspecting that hand would have been used and there might have been some debris under the nails, then you can go for nail scrapings. And if a dead body has been brought to you to look for the assailant, he would have handled the assailant, then you can go for nail clippings also. Nail clipping and scraping are different, that you just take the scraping debris from the nail, it is nail scraping, and if you cut the nail completely and remove that, then it is nail clipping. Next, other important points. These are features which you see like in a special case, like asphyxiant gases. Carbon monoxide poisoning is there. Then what we will do? Lungs and spleen should be preserved. If there is a heavy metal poisoning, then heavy metals are stored in nails, hair and bones. If there is a narcotic substance or anesthetic death that the person has consumed and patient has died on table, then while under the anesthesia, you might be asked to do autopsy on such cases. Then brain, lung, brain with CSF should be taken. Advanced decomposition is there. Patient has extensive decomposition. You don't find any blood. You don't find tissues to be in a normal state. Then what will you do? Thigh muscle. Next. Okay, we have talked about alcohol preservation. Okay, while doing the alcohol examination, you will be asked to do this in casualty also. You preserve urine, you preserve blood, both samples, so that we can make a correlation. This I'll tell you in alcohol examination why both urine and blood should be taken. Then while dead body is being examined, there is a chance that the dead body is there, then there is a chance that the alcohol in the body would have got consumed or deteriorated. Even the microorganisms could have consumed it, could have distorted it. So what we will do is we will go with preservation of vitreous for alcohol examination. Vitreous in a dead. Vitreous from the eye we will take a, we'll suck out the vitreous through a syringe and needle and replace it with something else. Replace it with water or normal saline. This vitreous will be sent for chemical analysis. And usually it will be sent in sodium fluoride. Any liquid sample that you preserve at autopsy, usually the method of usually the preservative of choice is sodium fluoride. So if they ask you what is the preservative for vitreous or blood or urine, usually it is sodium fluoride. For alcohol case, in urine it will have a, there will be a mercury salt, thiomersal, that can be. Narcotics we have talked about. Insecticides, fat, momentum can be preserved. Decomposed bodies we have seen, heavy metals we have seen. So these all circumstances we know. Decomposed high muscles, high metals, nail, hair, bones. Okay. After the autopsy, what we will do? Histopath we have seen, chemical examination, biological examination. Next. After the autopsy, body should be given to who? Who should we hand over the body to? Police officer. We should always hand over the body to police officer. And also we should take a receipt from the police officer about handling the and handing over the evidence. All evidences should be handed over to the police always. No other person should be given. Investigating officer is the only person whom you will give any evidence or any report. If he has to get the report at emergency situation or something, then he has to give an undertaking saying that authority letter about who can collect it. He will authorize somebody else to come and present on his behalf to collect. That authority letter has to be thoroughly signed and authorized by him. Otherwise, you are not supposed to give your medical, legal or documents to anybody else. Remember this. Next.